for his fighting his cancer. Um, this also for the big guy upstairs. And this show is going to be not about the Idaho Four, not about the Canfield Fire massacres, but other things I learned while I was doing those stories. And it's a very interesting story. Goes all the way back to the Oppenheimers and the Rothschilds and German banking, Hanoverian banking, and Frankfurt banking, and going after the oil, not the oil, excuse me, the gold and silver here in Idaho. More gold comes out of Idaho in the early days than all of the gold rush and the Yukon gold rush, the California gold rush. The silver that comes out of Idaho also is more than the Comstock lode. And most people don't know this banking background, but that's as we're doing research and going with meeting different folks, they say you need to look at the Blackbird singing in the middle of the night. You need to think of, and cover the dark thread, the dark hand behind all the events. And once you understand the dark hand and the dark thread behind all the events, you'll understand everything. But if you don't know the background, let's say of Judge Hippler down in the Idaho 4, if you don't know he's connected to this banking cartel that goes all the way back to the Oppenheimers in Germany, you won't understand the story. And when you first hear these things, you think, and this is Teresa Roth is the local reporter that's done a lot of this work. When you first hear these things, you think, is that really true? You know, is the Oppenheimers really have a lock with the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers on all the gold and silver and making claims and all these claims and so forth? And it's true. There's a lot of Oppenheimers still on the board, and there's these various educational boards. The Idaho State Board of Education, the ISBE, and then there's this Idaho Business for Education, control the education, control the minds, you control the society, that have Oppenheimers on it still today. Like Skip Oppenheimer, Doug Oppenheimer. So I thought that was pretty funny. Stewie Griffin says, great tune. Saw the Beatles many times in Las Vegas. That's the show that does the Beatles review, I think. The song never sounded better. Thanks for all the work you do and great work. Yeah. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken dreams and learn to fly, or broken wings and learn to fly. So I thought, what a great title of a song for today's show, because there's the Blackbird mine. And this gets into what I love about citizen journalism, which is not only that we bring, we don't just bring spectators, we bring active participants. It's almost like they had a 3-on-3 basketball tournament and there was 6 people playing. And all of a sudden our buses unload and we have 6,000. And all of a sudden it becomes an event where you got just this tremendous people doing validation and digging, verification, digging for new data sources, new data points, and so forth. And it really turns into a jamboree type event everywhere we go, which is awesome because I have this great cadre of international researchers behind me, which is awesome. And one of the things, while you're covering some stories and you're waiting for FOIAs to come back for dash cams, and you're waiting for FOIAs to come back for body cameras and so forth, is you have time to do a couple of other little stories. And one of them was all these billionaires flying in. It just so happens while we were doing these 2 stories, and I was only here to do one story, and then another one fell in my lap, that the Idaho Billionaire Boys Summer Camp was happening at the same time. This is where Zuckerberg's coming in, and Iger from Disney, and Sherry Redstone from Skydance, and Ellison's kid from Skydance, top names in entertainment. Group effort always produces the best info. Absolutely. It's sort of like having a 5,000 person whiteboard session, crime board session. 5,000 heads are better than one, which is really great. So anyway, one of the things we were covering is the Billionaire Boys Camp, and when you look at what these jets come from all over the world. They come into this. Well, you can't really see it, but they come into this. If Idaho is a pork chop, and the panhandle of is right there, then about in the middle of the of the pork chop, or about the middle of the pan, if this Idaho panhandle is where I am now, is where the Billionaires Boys Camp is. And why do and it's not just boys, it's also Sherry Redstone is one of the richest women in the world, who owns the old Paramount Pictures, so forth. And they're trying to get that purchase with Larry Ellison's son with Skydance Entertainment. They're trying to get that merger to happen and so forth with Trump. And that's a big deal right now. But why are they all coming to Idaho? It's beautiful in the summer. The lakes are pristine. The hunting is great if you want to do big game hunting. I don't hunt. I couldn't. You see these people like Travis Decker, who kills his own children. You can see how he ends up killing his own children, because if you can kill some of these beautiful things, these mountain lions, they're so forth, they're not hurting anybody, and we don't need it for food. Go to Costco if you need to eat. They're killing these beautiful mountain lions and everything and so forth. It's just like, why? Just to put a trophy on your wall, just so that you can have some trophy that you can Skydance, owned by David Ellison, yes, just so that you can have this little monument to yourself that you killed one of God's creations. Just stay home, go to Costco, let the mountain lion. And I see Travis Decker, this mass murderer, killed all his own children. If you start killing beautiful things and you get in a habit, you end up killing your kids. And that's not a good thing. And he could still be on the loose here, not far from me, steps away from me here. I still think he is not far away, but because killers are never far away from precious resources, precious metals, and that's where all this story kind of comes back together. So anyway, they're in the middle of Idaho while we're doing this story. They're all flying in. It's the biggest mergers. It was the same way last year when we covered it in Sun Valley. If you remember the original story last year we covered was Harriman of, one of the railroad barons with George Bush family, was the original person who said that was the bend in the railroad that happened there. And he's the one who ended up making a ski resort out of it. So would never go to Idaho or anywhere else in the USA. I feel safer in China. There you go. Well, don't get too close to the Three Gorges Dam. That's all. Xi Jinping might have a little surprise for you one day. You might have a little water in your bathtub there with Xi Jinping. Hello, good morning. Humans have been killing animals for a long time. I'm not. If I get it, the woolly mammoth. We need to kill the woolly mammoth to stay warm. We need to eat the food, etc. I'm saying we don't need to do that now. And I doubt that Travis Decker, when he killed the mountain lion, and you see him posing with this mountain lion, I doubt he ate the mountain lion, the food. I know a whole bunch of hunters that shoot deer, and they make venison, and they make venison jerky. And I'm all in favor of that, because the food is being eaten. The food is being consumed. What I'm talking about is the guys who leave everything in the field and then just, take I understand they have to take the carcass, but that goes for dog food and rendering. And then what they really want is the trophy. One of the guys is the FBI guy that lives right here, that goes all the way back to Aryan Nation and goes all the way back to Aryan Ruby Ridge. And it's just a mindset is what I'm talking about, which is, I am dominant. I can kill things. I can mount them on my wall, right? And you end up. Well, I mean, he killed all of his kids, so I'm just saying, I'm not. I didn't kill his kids. He did, and he's the one who's still loose. And what I'm saying is, elites sometimes like to have guys like that around, because it allows them to stay in dominance. It allows them to stay in control. If you have a Travis Decker on your side and you can loosen Travis Decker to create mass formation psychosis, that you can shoot fire chiefs who don't want your software, for instance. If I have Palantir software, right, and I have a new module that comes out with Palantir for civil insurrection, I only need one Travis Decker to create mass formation psychosis in any city I want, any day I want, right? So that's the power I'm talking about here is if I have two fire chiefs that don't want my software, I can get a brony boy to put his van in the way and call in a fire and then get enfilade fire on them and take out two fire chiefs in 3 shots, right? And now Battalion 3 is no longer being used in Coeur d'Alene. Battalion 3 software is no longer being used in Kootenai County. Battalion 3 software is no longer being used in North Pines. I can control the events just with one guy, right? That's what I'm talking about, is that mentality of, hey, I can kill it, so and therefore I can make things go my way. I'm not talking about somebody who's trying to feed their family or clothe their family or not trying to um, survive the winter. I get that. I get we're top of the food chain. And like I even represented a couple of folks that were making venison. I didn't represent them. I gave them a good word that we're doing venison jerky and so forth. Hey, great. I love that because you're using the actual killings rather than just putting a trophy on your wall. And this is the local Wayne Manis, this local FBI guy. This is the way he thinks about it. Is I'll create these cults, these violent cults, and he's a big time hunter. I'll create these violent cults, and then whenever I need to take them out and put a trophy on my wall, I'll go ahead and do that. That's how you end up with the Aryan Knights right now. The Aryan Knights here in Idaho, and I'm just saying the facts. When you feed the monster like that, the Aryan Knights are more powerful than the local sheriff. They're afraid to mention the Aryan Knights in Moscow, Idaho, because they're all afraid of being killed. So they pick a guy who's a wheelman for one of the drug kids that was called there that morning. That's the Kohlberger case. He didn't kill the kids. He didn't have a footprint in there. He doesn't have any blood on him. He doesn't have any knife. How is it that Hitler, the judge, disallows all the information of discovery? Well, if you trace Hitler back, he goes back to this Idaho State Board of Education through this Idaho sort of banking cartel, which goes all the way back to the earliest days of mining in Idaho for gold and silver. And there's also this Blackbird mine is also a big cobalt mine. And now we're transitioning out of gold and silver. Still a lot of gold and silver here, right? With new mining techniques. But now we're transitioning into cobalt and the EVs and the rare earth metals. So that's why I'm saying this is an interesting study, because you get to look at the whole microcosm, right? Rather than just a couple of stories, and reach deeper into these stories and learn something about the future by going to the Billionaire Boys Camp and sort of like crashing the party and watching their presentations. You sort of get an insight into the future. You get an insight into what are the industries of the future. And this is the EV market. And this is where the Blackbird deposits come in. This 55-mile belt here in Idaho, going through central Idaho, which is the song that the Beatles were singing about, Blackbird Mine, Blackbird singing in the middle of mine, right? Take this broken wings and learn to fly, right? I mean, this is what the Beatles sing about. They sing about the Blackbird Mine. They sing about the cobalt. And who knew the Beatles would know, right, about the cobalt? Who knew the Beatles would know that in the year 2025, if man is still alive, who knew that they would know so much about the future industries? Who knew that they would be informing the presentations made at the Billionaire Boys Club that this is the future? It reminds me of when I was down in Winnemucca on the gold mine in Nevada, and then what's right across from me? And no one's declaring it's a gold mine when I'm there, and I'm saying, Elon, there's a gold in them Nar Hills. Then Rio Tinto comes in about 6 weeks later and says it's a gold mine and opens a huge gold mine. But it's also these rare earth metals. All this old gold mining and old silver mining, the tunnels are already dug. You can now go back in and go in for things like lithium, go in for things like, they're taking these nuclear materials and using waste slag from the old Mark Rich slag piles when they were trying to enrich uranium, and then go into there and then extract rare earth metals that are these anodes for batteries. You have an anode and a cathode on your battery, and they end up So much electricity flows through them, they corrode. Well, anti-corrosive agents are coming out of and being mined out of this uranium slag. So what's interesting is this same group of LP Geis, Department of Energy, Q level clearance people that are going to these conferences and learning about these new investments in rare earth metals, these extractive industries to do these anodes for these batteries, looking at things like the Blackbird mine. They're all singing. They all come out singing Blackbird, singing in the middle of the night, right? They know that this is, they need to take these wings and learn to fly right here. They need to learn about cobalt, right? So this is extremely timely, and it's not necessarily what everybody wants to. We're not all billionaire investors, so it's not going to mean much to us. But it is interesting to follow the mindset of the billionaires and what they're looking into and what they're investing in. I see Scott here. He does a lot of stuff with hydrogen. He does a lot of stuff with small modular reactors. This is Randy saying hello. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Never be capable of good. No meat here. Yeah, some people don't eat meat, so then so don't get me wrong. I think hunting is good. I think it's a good activity. Remember Bill Clinton? He used to say, I would never take the gun away from anyone in Arkansas, because he had a pretty redneck constituency, right? Because I used to go hunting with my dad. It's like, well, I didn't have my dad. I wrote a whole bunch of books about how I didn't have dads. But when I need the votes of all the rednecks going out and hunting, I'll start talking about it, right? And remember, I'm Cherokee, right? So I can say, you white people came here and took our venison and so forth. So anyway, my point being is that nothing wrong with hunting at all. I love hunting. I just don't like the hunter mentality in a billionaire mindset where they go, hey, you know what? There's 2 fire chiefs that are in the way of my Palantir Gotham in Coeur d'Alene or in Kootenai County. Rather than going through the process of trying to convince them that an integrated fire and police solution would be good, why don't I just have a brony boy block a fire access road and lure them to a remote area, and then have my guy Travis Decker put 3 slugs in their heart? That's easier. I mean, we've already got the guy who already knows how to hunt. We'll put 3 slugs in his heart, and now we're done. Right? We don't have to worry about those firemen anymore. Right? We get our Gotham. Blackbird don't cry. Blackbird don't cry. I don't know that song, so that's good. People in our cities want freedom, and thanks for standing up. Yes, it's great. Great to have ECAT here, in another state capital, in Tallahassee, where there is this Palantir system. And again, these things happen kind of below the surface. You see, the news is sort of the cat and the laser pointer. You're always kind of confused following the laser pointer, and you never get any in-depth reporting ever, right? We try to say, okay, we grab a couple of stories and we report them deeply. Idaho 4. How could you leave the area Knights out of Idaho 4? Right? How could that possibly happen? Is he really riding a hovercraft through with no footprints? Is he really masked up in surgical gowns so there's no transfer DNA on Kohlberger, no transfer DNA? Is he really killing all these people without a dog barking? No, it's impossible. Why would Judge Hippler suppress all that information until the day after the sentencing? Right? Well, this Teresa Roth did show me that he is a descendant of this sort of banking cartel here, this mineral gold and silver. Goes all the way back to the gold and silver days of Oppenheimer. And when Rothschild and also Rockefeller and Oppenheimer all competed for the gold and silver here. So it's an interesting thing, and the thread that it runs through it, the river that runs through it, is this Idaho State Board of Education and this Idaho Business Executives, this IBE and ISBE. So Bird calls at 2:49 a.m. GM JB, hello. Legalizing drugs. Well, we'll get back to that. Portland legalized drugs and really made it into a bad situation. I think That's the other piece of this is a lot of the elite families got into drugs. And if you have the Aryan Knights as your drug runners, you have no interest in wiping out the Aryan Knights. That's your people that are the shotgun guys on your drug stagecoach. If you're making billions or trillions on that, do you want that business to stop? Do you want when your guys go a little bit crazy, when your stagecoach shotgun guys go a little crazy and they kill 4 people in a university, do you want that drug business to stop? No. What do you tell the judge? Do not bring up Aryan Knights. Do not bring up Aryan Knights. Don't bring up my Aryan Knights assassins like Travis Decker. How does Travis Decker kill all of his children in early June with his GMC Sierra and then drive and then have another fender bender with that same GMC Sierra in the same city? Again, with the same MO where he says he kidnaps people in grocery parking lots, right? At grocery outlet. On the 17th of June. We think he meets up here and comes here after that fender bender to somewhere on Sherman Street, meeting somewhere between Canfield Mountain and Sherman Street where the Brony Boy is. And why? Because we go for the metadata. We geolocate him with a Nana phone. The Nana phone is an iPhone 16, which only has one name in it. It's his grandmother's name. It's Nana. Person who was given the phone, the young lady who was given the phone, he's going to go meet somebody and he's told, don't bring your phone. Now, what MO does that match up with? That's the same MO that Sarah Harrison, the kindergarten teacher and the nurse who's kidnapped the day before, also going to go get groceries, right? So now if that indeed happened, if she's kidnapped, and she's told, don't bring your phone, could that have happened with Wes Rowley? When he's first meeting Wes Rowley, right, as a runner for the Aryan Knights here, don't bring your phone. What do you do with your iPhone 16? Do you throw it away? Or do you give it to someone in hopes that they'll return it? You can call them back and get it back later. That's exactly what he did 3 days later. He tried to call back the person that he put the phone. He didn't throw the phone away. He put the phone in a woman's purse on Sanders Beach, knowing that she wouldn't lose it, and then called her back 3 days later because he knew the phone number, right? And the number that girl who got the Nana phone and called the grandmother and called the mother of Wes Rowley, right, also was left a number, and Wes Rowley called that number, right? So we know that's Wes Rowley's phone. And Wes Rowley's trying to get the phone back, but he's told not to bring the phone in the initial meeting. Who would do that other than an assassin on the run like Travis Decker? So again, there are all kinds of cameras all along this corridor, in this corridor between Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, which have automatic license readers. And the Quad Cities Drug Task Force, we know that's the Quad Cities. It goes all the way down to the Idaho 4. It goes all the way down to Moscow, Idaho, this quad jurisdictional area. So a Coeur d'Alene cop can go into Spokane, which normally never happens. And we know they're tracking the Nana phone. We know that on that beach, when he gives that phone away, we know a member of the task force of Fort Coeur d'Alene follows that Nana phone into Washington. So we know it's involved somehow in drugs, right? Why can't we look at the automatic license plate reader when Travis Decker comes here and go, oh, that's a GMC Sierra. That's Travis Decker. We need to pull him over, right? How could he be seen in the Idaho forests here and not stop when he goes through what they call the flock system? The flock system is a flock of cameras, literally, in that quad drug task force area where we are right here. He goes through a flock of cameras and he gets safe passage. Now, how could that happen unless he has state sponsorship? How could that happen unless he has state sponsorship? And we want to geofence the phone of Wes Rowley to fill in the timeline. The sheriff has 5 interactions last year with him. We went to all the locations. There was only 3 that actually are geolocated. And it all stops in September of last year. What happened in the last year up until the week before he has to give that phone, that Nana phone, to another to a young girl on the beach because he can't bring his phone for tracking. Decker doesn't want to be tracked, right? So that's key information that's still, and that gives us insight into state sponsorship. That's why the only reason we're following this up is to get to the dark hand, get to the Palantir Gotham dark hand of this and saying, hey, what's the end game here? Why do you shoot these firemen? What's the motive? Is it really the Brony boy because he couldn't get into being a fireman, so he decided to shoot these fire guys? Well, if you actually go up and follow up, and again, nobody does this in news, but we actually went up there and said you would have had to have. He'd have to get mad, right? The Brony boy would have to get mad. And you can see right in the film, the Brody boy does not have a shotgun. If you were talking to somebody to move their car and all of a sudden they got a shotgun out of their car, wouldn't you move your car? Wouldn't you back up? Wouldn't you call it in and go, law enforcement, get up here? Wouldn't that be radio traffic that would exist? Wouldn't there be other people that dash cams going, hey, the Brony boy's got a gun? Wouldn't this be all on the radio traffic? This is why I FOIA'd all the radio traffic, and we have a 22-minute black box between 1:38 and 2 o'clock when the shooting starts. Why? Right? That's going to give us insight into if it is state-sponsored or not. But we know the sheriff's already making up stories, right? We know that the sheriff's saying he's got a shotgun, and we know that his rifle cracks. So we know there's stories. And again, going up and getting to the fairy tales and wiping the fairy tales off and getting into the real story is how we get to the dark hand. Usually it's how we get to the state sponsorship, right? There is this link with Hitler, with the judge, to this banking cartel kind of family. And does seem to be an Idaho resources play up on that mountain, up on Canfield Mountain. In this sense, it's oil and gas, or natural gas mainly. But there always seems to be this thread underneath these stories in Idaho where there's massive wealth, right? And it's the massive wealth is the only reason why you would have these Pinkertons. Travis Decker's sort of a Pinkerton, and he travels with impunity wherever he goes, right? And he can murder whoever he wants, and nobody stops him. Nobody even mentions his name, sort of like Jesse James' ghost. The only way that can happen is with state sponsorship. So that's why MP materials, rare earth in the future. MP materials. I'm trying to think of where MP materials is based. I think this is one that Trump is pushing. I'm not real familiar with it, but I think MP materials is a U.S.-based rare earth metals provider, and most of the rare earth coming from China, and most of the rare earth coming from Africa, Congo especially, cobalt and all these. Where cobalt's found, a lot of these rare earths are found, like tantalum and those things that go in your iPhone, for resistors in your iPhone. So I think MP is the U.S. play in rare earth metals, and I think Trump likes that. I think Trump sees these strategic metals, and this is how Trump is thinking. Is like Trump is sort of like sitting in on the Billionaire Boys Club presentations and going, hey, it's not just for you guys. This is for the United States. This is in the strategic interest of the United States. We don't want you to go out and monopolize all of them and then create mass formation psychosis where we have to pay 20 or 30 times on the dollar. We don't want the United States to have to pay 20 or 30 times on the dollar for these key resources. This is also the thing that Elon Musk is interested in with these EV resources. I think it's Perpetua is another one that is another name. So anyway, a little bit more of an eclectic, ethereal show today. Not so much hard-driven news, but hey, it's Friday. We can do whatever we want on Friday. It's Happy Friday, right? Yes, people are mentioning my Cherokee background. There was a guy named Cherokee Parks. He played on the North Carolina basketball team. I thought he's more Cherokee than me, but I thought I had better college statistics because I had pretty darn good statistics in college. Cherokee Parks had really, really good statistics, so I had to shut up about that. Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell is coming into the news. They're interviewing her. really, if you want to know what Ghislaine Maxwell is going to say, look at all the stuff we did in 2017. Look at all the stuff she was doing in rare earth metals. Look at what she was doing with Terramar. Look at what she was doing with the UN and trying to get the rights of 12 miles for undersea mining and so forth, offshore rights, the 12-mile international line rather than the older lines that were 200 miles out into the ocean from the old fishing rights days off the Newfoundland coast. Look at all of our old stuff. Look at the stuff we did down in British Virgin Islands, where we did the trench, the big, the tongue of the ocean. Look at all the stuff we did in U.S. Virgin Islands, and that'll tell you what Jeff Epstein was doing. Jeff Epstein was also involved in investor conferences of all these rare earth metals and so forth, and these future industries like EV and batteries and so forth. It's not a hickey. My Nick has hinted. That's the Cherokee. That's the Cherokee coming out. When I get in sun, Cherokee starts coming out. Can you go through the mosaic method for dummies? Oh, sure. We could have 1,000 years of ignorance of what causes typhoid, for instance. And we could have 1,000 people on 1,000 different cigar boxes in London all saying, it's this, it's that, it's these bad humors, it's bile in your liver, it's the bad humor of this, it's, all these theories, right? But somebody at some point has to go to the metadata and say, hey, I got an idea. Rather than all of us arguing and having all of our little stumps and tree stumps and cigar boxes that we're standing on telling everybody what we think why don't we go to the metadata? Why don't we actually see in a concentrated map where everybody's dying? Why don't we just put pins in a map? I call mosaic method pins in a map. Why don't we just put pins in a map for a while before we bloviate and blather about what we think it is? Why don't we just go ahead and put pins in a map first, right? And then we'll look at where the concentration is, and then the concentration, the pattern, the river of information, the river of news will appear, right? It'll become evident. This is what James Grimshaw does in Vietnam and talking about using the mosaic method and why he has the lowest casualties and the highest kill rate, right? Is the river of news. It comes out. And then what happened was there was a guy who had no medical training, or at least in epidemiology. He founded the science of epidemiology. He founded and figured out the cause of typhoid. And he basically laid the foundation for germ theory. His name's Dr. Snow, and it's the Broad Street pump. And by putting pins on a map and then burning shoe leather like the Cherokee here, like G-Dub does, right? Just by burning shoe leather, and interviewing all the people, they all found out they used that pump, right? So they looked at the concentration of people dying from typhoid, and then they kept getting closer and closer to the reddest of the red spots, and then they went to the a tenement housing around the Broad Street pump in London, and then they found that's where the highest incidence of death was. And he said, it's going to be something's associated with this pump. And then he looked and said, well, it's got to be the sewage, because upstream from the pump is all the sewage that's coming into the Thames. But if you go a little bit further up the Thames, the red dots go down until you go all the way out to, where the Queen had, and this is why Queen Elizabeth, I think, had her place out there in not Kensington, but the Royal Castle, is to get the Thames water before it got through all the effluent in London. Can't believe I'm forgetting where the Queen lived up there. But you get the idea is like, hey, it's something that's in the water. This is where the expression comes from. It's in the water, right? There's something in the water. And then you just take a thing of water and then you look at it and you compare that to the Queen's water up in the Thames, and you compare the two differences, right? And you boil off the differences, and then you're left with these microbes that cause various diseases. And really all science And really the scientific method, right, come from the mosaic method. The mosaic method of just pins on a map, right? And that's what we do in citizen journalism. We just come in and we get, when we do a story, we have thousands of people giving me different data points, and I let the pattern, I don't jump into it. I let the pattern flow. I say, okay, all right, we have 4 people murdered. They withheld the banking cartel, Hitler banking cartel, withheld the fact that it was 50 stabbings of the Xana. The banking cartel, Hitler banking cartel, withheld there was 20 stabbings of Kaylee. Right? If people would have known that, they'd have said, "How could this possibly be?" They had pushed a narrative that this guy silently went through and killed everyone in their sleep. You even heard that yesterday with the sister of Kaylee Gonsalves say that if you wouldn't have attacked her in her sleep, she would have, fucking kicked your ass. Well, that's not true. They're pushing a narrative there, but she had 20 stab wounds. Hitler, the descendant of the banking cartel, right, withheld that evidence, and that didn't come out till 7 p.m. to control the news, while all of the kids and the survivors were making their statements. So that Megyn Kelly, and all the interviews of all the people who survived Idaho 4 was dominating the news. But what wasn't coming out was this fact of 50 stabbings with Xana and 20 stabbings with Kaylee. And there was this massive fight. There would have been blood all over. There would have been cacophonous screams. The dog would have been barking its head off, right? No, there's no possible way it could have been Koberger, right? So, but that was withheld. That information was withheld from you. So the mosaic method is basically taking the information, not making a judgment, taking the information and saying, this had to be more than one person. It had to be 2 guys upstairs with 2 of the girls, 2 guys downstairs, right, with the girl and the guy who ends up getting murdered. And there had to be somebody who had the dog outside. And we, with the Aryan Knights, and we see in the video, right, we say there's going to be a video with 4 people entering and then a 5th person, which is going to be Kopaka. And then sure enough, the video surfaces at 3:25 where there's 4 Aryan Knights coming in and then there's another person coming in. How could that story be repressed if it wasn't state sponsored? If there wasn't state sponsoring repression, if Hitler, wasn't this kind of didn't have this banking legacy, if there wasn't state sponsorship, you couldn't have repressed that story. Right? If there wasn't state sponsorship, you couldn't have the Brony Boy. You couldn't have the Brony Boy story holding water. If somebody sees a kid who's going to shoot you with a shotgun walking your way, you're going to back your truck up. You're not going to wait for the kid to walk up with a shotgun out of his truck. I walked off the distance. It's about 300, 250 steps difference. Are you going to you can see it right in front of you. You're going to let the Brony Boy walk in your direction and shoot you from 10 feet away? You're not going to see that in his hand. Nothing about that makes sense. So there's state sponsorship to suppress the true story, right? As soon as I see that state sponsorship, I say, oh, that's where we go. That's where we're going to go find the dark hand. So there's Deb Johnson. Again, we can't trace the Ford Econoline van to the Brony Boy. Where does he get the Ford Econoline van? We went to look at Jason Rowley. We went to look at Sarah Rowley, the parents, to see if that's where the Ford Econoline van comes from, and it doesn't come from there. So that's another thing. Again, the sheriff was saying, don't say white van, don't say white van, don't say white van. I'm saying that's what our research shows, right? We said that on July 1st. We went up there and showed it was a white van. Everyone said we made it up. Then it turns out the pictures come out and there's the white van blocking the road, right? So there's state sponsorship here. And when I feel that state sponsorship, I say, oh, this is Aryan Knights. We went out to the Aryan Knights safe house. We went to the Aryan Knights church. Not saying Tim Remington is sponsoring the Aryan Knights. I'm not saying the program, the Good Samaritan program for letting these violent Aryan Knights out of prison is anything he deliberately does. I'm saying they're infiltrating his church, right? I'm saying he's infiltrating his church. And the mother of one of the victims, Xana, was in that program twice. She was in jail for 10 months after the murders. So she's in the program twice. So there's a definite thread in the mosaic method. There's a thread that's constantly Aryan Knights, right? The Aryan Knights to Idaho 4. The Aryan Knights are doing this. Who are they working for? Right? Who are all these guys working for, and why is everyone protecting them? Well, they're sort of like the Pinkertons from Rockefeller. They're sort of like the Pinkertons for the Oppenheimers. They're sort of like the Pinkertons for they're the tough guys. This is not new. This has been around for 200 years, right? To have muscle, when the original uh, uh, before William Randolph Hearst built the gold business, his father George Hearst had these tough guys, and they would wait for the guys to come in with a big mining claim into the assayer's office, and then they would trail them back to their claim. Then they would kill everybody involved in the mining claim, and they would bushwhack them. That's where bushwhacking comes from. And then they ended up getting this huge Comstock lode. They got a gold mine, and then they also were able to later get a silver mine, and he ends up building a newspaper empire out of it from William Randolph Hearst. Now, most people don't know that story. Most people who watch Citizen Kane get a wacky version of that. For some reason, Orson Welles tells a wacky version of that, where he just all of a sudden woke up one day as a little kid and got a gold mine as a gift. No, the family was an East Coast family, and they had agents out here murder the people who were a part of that gold, which I think was in Colorado. Murder the miners who found that, and then they moved him out here. William Randolph Hearst moved him out here to try to create a separation, so it didn't look like a murder for the earth resources. But that's the story of William Randolph Hearst. Does it surprise you then that William Randolph Hearst, if that's how your fortune started with a crime, right? Does that surprise you that you then murder Tom Ince when Ince is starting the studio system in California and creating the Westerns and creating the movie system, the studio movie system? Does it surprise you that William Randolph Hearst invites Tom Ince, who really the Oscars should be called the Inces or the Tommies, right? Does it surprise you that he burned his studio down twice? Does it surprise you that they poisoned him on his yacht? No. Once you see how these fortunes are created and the crimes that are committed, then you have insight, right? And that's the important piece here. So the mindset, the billionaire's focus, it's not a mindset, it's a mindset. Billionaires focus on the surface metal. The metadata below the surface is the truth, and that is the truth. That is exactly correct. More good stuff. Yeah. Song Lover. Yeah. I wish I could sing that song. It's a beautiful song. And I thought was, they have the birds in that song. Blackbird singing dead of night. Take these broken wings, learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. And that was the civil rights at that time. Maybe that was what the Blackbird was. But they had all these blackbirds chirping in the background. And it was a really helter-skelter time. And Blackbird kind of calmed everybody down a little bit, right? Calmed everybody down. Hit that like button, y'all. Yeah. Do you believe? I don't believe you have a nano phone. Why didn't you hand in the evidence? Well, it's not my phone. I never said it was. It was I don't cancel free speech. I just put your stupid question up. If you don't believe we have the nano phone, then you can just wait for the story to come out in the news. But Turn Over Every Stone has the nano phone, and we do have the nano device. This is the same way. Again, they hate this when we do this. This is the same thing about the BlackBerry in Congress with the Senate Sergeant of Arms with the BlackBerry markings. This is the thing that unraveled the whole Trump-Russia takedown, which was run out of Imran Awan and run with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and run with Nancy Pelosi, right? So you don't have the phone. You don't have the phone. Well, boss, we have the phone, so yeah. So yeah, we do. And just watch us. Just watch us do the data fencing. Data fencing costs some money, but just watch us. The sheriff doesn't want, they're saying, why wouldn't the sheriff want that evidence? The sheriff doesn't want the evidence. The sheriff doesn't even want to push out what the address of West Roney was after September. 2024. He knows I believe I know the no-tell motel that he was in, where there are a lot of 8A people and a lot of Good Sam, and it could very well be that the hotel, the motel, no-tell, we had actually one of our folks stay in one of the three that we thought it might be, which was El Rancho, but it's not El Rancho. It's close to El Rancho though, on Sherman. But you look for, where's the 8A money going? Where's the rehab money going? There's a rehab just on the other side. We looked at all the rehabs on both sides, but the sheriff is not saying that Wes Rowley's moved into an apartment. He was saying he lived out of his van. That was the story. And then we said, are you sure he's not in a drug rehab? We went over to Altar Church and we went over to Good Sam. Are you sure he's not in, his rent wasn't being paid? Sure, Sheriff, are you sure his rent wasn't being paid for one of the no-tell motels near Sherman Avenue? Then the last press conference 3 weeks later, he came out and he goes, oh, well, yeah. We got all these drawings out of Wes's apartment. Oh, Sheriff, I thought he was living out of his van. Last time we talked to you, he was living out of his van. He didn't have a Sherman apartment. And then we geolocated the phone, and now all of a sudden you're admitting that he had a, okay. The story's changing here. The story is a change. And didn't Bob Dylan sing about that, Sheriff, with the story changing? Yeah, let's get to 100K. That'd be great. So when the local news gathering parents picked up the kid at Sandy Hook, oh God, we covered that story in such detail. We had so many people saying there was two guys in black bloc running into the forest, and I just couldn't. Alex just would not listen, and Owen Schroyer just would not listen. I just everything I could do to keep them from stepping in that bucket of crap, but they didn't listen. So only 50 likes. Yeah. Monkey around the mountain. So yeah, it looks like, we got various trolls, but again, I'm not stalking you. You're coming here, right? You're coming here stalking me. And every time that happens, I tell you why you're stalking me. And it's because we had NSA looking the other way when terrorists got this encrypted communication. And it's through a company called PTEC. And that in 1999, a lot of the phones were originally given to terrorists in Kosovo through the diplomatic arm of the United Nations, which is called OSCE, right? So, and the idea here is just do not acknowledge all the things that we did, do not acknowledge how the NSA enabled 9/11, right? Do not acknowledge that. We're going to, create as many monkey memes as we can to stop it, right? And well, the monkey alert is them monkeying with the story. The truth of the story is encrypted communications with the encrypted Blackberries were given to the 9/11 hijackers. There's no other way it could have happened unless they had encrypted communications. The name of the company was PTEC. How did they have top secret clearance in FAA to run simulations and live exercises for planes being hijacked? They had that capability on 9/11, and they also had top secret clearances with the FBI and CIA. Now tell me how that could possibly happen. But it did. PTEC is the people. How could that happen with unencrypted communications? We followed it because that's my area of expertise. We acquired that company, PGP. I saw Dmitry Alperovich port that for the CIA to the BlackBerry, and that's how it happened. But yeah, you do have a pathetic troll. But when you see the pathetic troll, it's not a troll, it's a stalker, right? The people were stalking me the night I was at the Hijacker Hotel, talking about how did PTEC get encrypted communications. I'm at the Hijacker Hotel in Columbia, Maryland, right next to NSA. I know NSA gave them the technology. I know they gave PTEC the technology for encryption, and I know they gave it to the hijackers. And the important part about this, the encrypted network, is they're going to use it again and again and again. Libya, Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, Trump, Russia, the Trump impeachments, over and over and over again. They're using it, and it's all coming up now. Devin Nunes, it's great to see Devin Nunes out there, John Solomon, all my old friends from 2011. We took action though. We took out Podesta Group. We took out John Podesta. We took out Glenn Simpson. We took out Fusion GPS in 2017. Read the lawsuit, right? They were in Congress. They had all the information. They were in the Intelligence Committee. They had all the documents, but they didn't actuate the documents then. They didn't take out Podesta Group then. They didn't take out Fusion GPS then. Glenn Simpson left Washington, D.C., was hiding on a farm in Virginia so he wouldn't get served. We served Kim Fritz, and that collapsed Podesta Group, right? So it's not just good enough to have the information. You got to actuate the information, right? You got to actuate the information. You got to go to the hijacker hotel, right? You got to go find out who from PTAC gave the hijackers. So there's a little bit of risk involved here. And so you're always going to have monkeys, right? Some of the monkeys, by the way, now that the monkeys are here, some of the monkeys, Peter Tork, I interviewed an ex-girlfriend of his, and his mother worked in Columbus at a national laboratory, and they had a substance for whiting out information and writing it in because there was, whiteout was originally invented. If you remember, Truman wanted to bring over all these German scientists, but he didn't want Nazis. And he says, I'm not bringing in Nazis. I don't want Nazis. You can't have Nazis. And all they wanted to bring over, Alan Dulles and McCloy and so forth, all they wanted to bring over was Nazis. So they invented whiteout, which was a thing that you could, like a white acrylic nail polish like substance that you could put on. You could literally white out the Nazi. You could white out Nazi in somebody's file, right? Or the other thing they did was they put, when somebody would say so-and-so is a Nazi, they would put in the word not a Nazi. So they would white out the word before a Nazi and then put not, they would type over it. So that was invented. Whiteout was invented, or was Peter Tork's mother from the Monkees. Monkees was also a fake band. So were all the other Laurel Canyon fake bands. I wrote a 22-part series about that, Echoes of Laurel Canyon. But the original top secret clearance whiteout, they gave to Peter Tork's mother. Look it up. You won't believe it. So watched another presser where the sheriff was really nervous. Someone from the MSM queried about the firearm, and the sheriff got mad at her. Yeah, he came around the podium, and then he jiggled his gun. Did you see that? The sheriff came around the podium and jiggled his gun at her. Well, I noticed how the Brony boy supposedly was carrying a shotgun, and the bullets that are in Dave Tisdall and the bullets that went through the hearts of all the fire chiefs are not shotgun bullets. How could it be that Wes Rowley shot them? Ooh, that made him mad. Right? He came around the podium and walked right out into the thing, and then he jiggled his gun. It's hardcore out here. You got to have a little bit of courage to ask questions around here. Yeah, my fun comment, by contrast, immediately removed. I didn't see your fun comment. I haven't removed any comments, by the way. I haven't removed any comments. So if you had a fun comment, then I missed it. But I'm not trying to remove comments. If I'm letting the troll comment, why would I? And I'm putting your comment up, so I don't know how I'm avoiding that. But re-put up your comment. How am I? It's interesting when you're sharing information with a whole bunch of people internationally, and people think that you're somehow narcissistic or whatever. It's called a conduit communication. Or conversation. I'm not getting a bunch of art students, and I'm not bringing a bunch of art students into Los Angeles, right? And I'm not having them go out as Israeli art students in couples, really, good looking couples, and going to different people's homes and trying to put in art, and then trying to put in listening devices into DEA agents' homes or sheriff's homes. I didn't create a company called Comverse, which does the tapping at the actual phone switch, right? I didn't create the company Converse. I'm not Greg Carr. I'm not a billionaire, right? I'm not the person who bought the old Aryan nation with Greg Carr here. I'm not the person who bought the Amdocs, which is the capability of the American documents to go in with the Israeli art students and get all this information. That's all centered here through Greg Carr, right? Who has a very strong relationship with the sheriff, right? So, so if I'm taking massive risk, right, where there's Aryan Knights that want to kill me here, and I'm putting information out and risking my life for no compensation, all intents and purposes, how in any way? Plus, I've spent $750,000 of my own money, and I lose about $75,000 a year doing this, building a journalism school in Michigan. How could that possibly be construed as this is about me? It couldn't possibly be construed that this is about me. As a matter of fact, all of the metadata shows it's about everyone else. It's all about that I've taken my resources and given them to somebody else, and I'm putting myself at personal risk, right? So it's maybe I need to do something for myself finally at some point, right? Like I need to take a vacation day or something, right? So get to yourself, it maybe is the message you should be sending me. So I see this, but you're not saying anything. You're just putting pictures of monkeys up, and you're trying to say Peter Tork's mother had Q clearance, and you're trying to say that whiteout was used to bring in the Nazis. And I get it. I understand. I covered that story a long time ago. We went to Columbus. We went to the disco, which is the defense the people who did the vetting of the Nazis when they came in was at the Defense Information Security in Columbus, DISCO, they call it, Security Contractors, Defense Information Security Contractors Organization, DISCO or DISC, did the review. McDuff's dad had 68,000 files that he had to go through, right? So I'm acknowledging you. I'm acknowledging the monkeys. I'm acknowledging Peter Tork. Hey, when the monkeys, I grew up on the monkeys. I know the monkeys. I get it, right? People are saying, oh, you're hiding the monkeys with the vaccines. I've never hidden the monkeys with the vaccines. I've talked about the monkeys with the vaccines. So it might make him sing it better. I might be better than the monkeys, right? I might actually sing that song better than the monkeys. I agree with you. Ghislaine Maxon's a major player for sure. We covered Bob Maxwell in detail. We covered all these things. I was doing dishes. Oh, you might have got wrenched by ECAT. ECAT carries a wrench. So there you go. Eggstein Island was a former submarine base. We actually went there, and where I'm standing, the film I take of Water Island when I went to Epstein Island is over a submarine base, and they're taking over all these old bases and buying them for pennies on the dollar, and then getting all the mineral rights 12 miles out from these bases. That's the secret of Epstein's Island. Nobody covers it. And I do have a red neck, but that comes from my Cherokee. All right, love the Cherokees. Okay, so people are trying to say I have German blood. Yes, I do. So that's true. So all that's good. Yeah, it's a conduit. It's a place where people trade information. Good morning. Thank you. I'm way behind on all the messages, so I'll try to catch up here. I'm not sure what you mean by a poisoned well, other than the sheriff poisoning the information and not. When you introduce a 22-minute black box, that's poisoning the well, right? Why are you introducing a 22-minute black box? When I FOIA the information, why are you not supplying me the cameras? You don't have to give me the shooting. You can just give me everything leading up to the shooting. Give me the dash cams leading up to the shooting. Give me the body cams and the helmet cams leading up to the shooting. Give me the radio traffic leading up to the shooting. I'm not going to spoil any kids' visuals or anything trying to show the death scene of the two fire chiefs. I just want to confirm that they died of of what type of ammunition was fired, because there could be a guy loose. If Wes Rowley didn't do it, it had to be somebody else. And now we've got a mass murderer who killed his own children, right? So I think it's the sheriff that poisoned the well, not me. I'm the one who's going for transparency. The sheriff's the one obfuscating, right? Hampton Court, yes. Windsor. Windsor was where they went up the, and you know, when I respond to questions also, right? It's because somebody asked the question, right? It's not because I want to talk about Windsor Castle, right? It's somebody asked the question, and I know Dr. Snow went up to Windsor Castle and he said, "Hey, I can look in the water and it's crystal clear, crystal blue persuasion." Wasn't there a song about that? Crystal blue persuasion. Wasn't Tommy John or Tommy Franks or somebody, one of those Tommy guys? Didn't he talk about crystal blue persuasion? He said the water's great here in Windsor. This is why the Queen comes up here, for the waters, right? And something's in the water down there in London. And Dr. Snow, through the Mosaic method, basically extracted and became epidemiology. This is where the Queen sucks. They did suck the water out of the Thames. You're quite correct. That's where the term sucking comes from, right? The Queen did suck the water out of the Thames at Windsor. Only smart and sexy people are allowed to push the like button. Well, go for it. Go for it. Okay. Jews have been poisoning the water, and non-Jewish. Okay. Well, we talked to the first minister of Israel, Abba Aban. We did a movie with him. We did a series with him, 7-part series, The Birth of Israel. The poisoning of the water didn't come up, but we did do a poisoning well water story. I interviewed a guy who had been poisoned by a well. Again, people can summarize history however they want, but I actually talked to a guy who was in the sort of a Selka Scouts, sort of the same thing that Stephen Hatfield was in Namibia, in the border wars in Namibia, and he said he had been poisoned with hepatitis by Wouter Besson in the Black Bomb Project in Cape Town. I went to Cape Town to do the reporting. So you might say that was done. Wouter Besson was trying to come up with a solution for the Jewish immigrants in South Africa. I didn't find that thread, but I certainly did interview somebody who said they had been poisoned by Wouter Besson with a black bomb in Namibia in the border wars. And it's Stephen Hatfield with Selka Scouts in Rhodesia is going to be a very similar story. Let's see. Convicted with uncontrollable emotions. I don't remember that song. Convicted with uncontrollable emotions. That doesn't seem like you could sing that well, but convicted with uncontrollable emotions. I can't even think of how that could be sung. I do not understand so many things that are withheld besides covering the real story. Well, if you cover the real story and say, well, we had area Knights here clean up a drug deal. Maybe somebody flushed some drugs down the toilet and they were mad and they came in and they sent 2 guys upstairs, 2 guys downstairs. And they said, we're going to find out before we leave here who did it. We're going to kill one at a time till we do. And then the kids had nothing to do with it and they were all killed. That's why nobody called 911 for 8 hours. And that's why the woman who was accompanying them took the dog, right? And then they called one of their drug customers, which is Kopaka, and then Koberger took him over to get his meth. And also for Koberger is also a meth addict. You know, I noticed they're trying to say heroin addict. You know, I noticed they're trying to make Koberger into a heroin addict. He's not. He was a meth addict, like a lot of the other people who were victims. Their parents were into meth, right? They're trying to stay away from meth, do everything we can to stay away from meth. That's not truth. That's not truth. Truth has to win the day. It can't be these made up stories. And when I see elites trying to protect their Pinkertons, then I get involved, right? And that may be the end of me, but I get involved because the truth is more important than anything. When I'm doing truth, I think I'm working for him. So shut the front door. Um, I know what that means. That's CHFU, right? That's all right. I don't mind remember they're stalkers, they're not trollers, they're stalkers. And why are they stalking? Because they originally started stalking me that night. I was at the hijacker hotel trying to explain how the hijackers got encrypted communications from PTEC. That's what I was doing there. So when the stalker comes here, that's your reminder. That's how 9/11 happened. Yeah, they weren't sleeping. They said that yesterday, and they're trying to push this narrative that they were sleeping. They weren't sleeping. You don't get 20 stab wounds from sleeping. Check out Pavarotti. I put the picture of the CCTV camera at 325 of the four meeting the one person. I think that's Kopaka, who they're meeting. I think there's a sixth person holding the dog, but there it is. I posted Dylan video carrying Murphy in his last live comments. Yeah, I've heard this. I don't see the CCTV of Dylan carrying Murphy down the street, but I would be interested in seeing it. Because that to me is hard to explain. Why is Murphy, again, I go when I see things like one of the victims who survives this event carrying the dog down the middle of the street at 3:30 to keep the dog out of the house, I think it's got to be Aryan Knights. If it was just one person coming in that you didn't know, saying, look, I want you to take the dog out of the house while I kill all your roommates, I don't think Dylan would go, well, you asked in such a nice way. I am going to take the dog while you kill all my roommates. You see what I mean? It has to be that somebody said, I'm going to kill you. And it's got to be a group of people, right? We're going to kill you. If you don't take that dog out of here right now, you're going to die. Okay, I'll take the dog. And so I'm not in the house during the murders, right? Then she could be seen on CCTV. That would explain her coming back when she gets a message from her other roommate saying it's okay to come back, right? That's the other thing we don't have is the messages from all this period of time. But the dog starts barking after the thud, after the whimper, after the last person's killed and after the last thud. Then the dog comes back after everybody escapes out the back sliding glass door. Then it's almost like Dylan's waiting with the dog till she sees everybody leave, and then she comes back with the dog, and then the dog immediately starts barking. Flimsy hollow core doors. What about the driver? Well, there's another thing that the DoorDash driver is invited in at 4:00. Doesn't that seems an obvious way to establish an alibi? You use the murdered person's phone to order DoorDash. We're all leaving. We're getting out of there. We've killed everybody. They didn't tell me where the drugs are. They have nothing to do with the drugs on the first floor. We thought they did. We thought they flushed the drugs down the thing. We killed them one at a time to try to find the drugs, right? But they weren't involved in the drugs, right? Well, how are we going to cover ourselves? Well, let's invite Koberger here and Kopaka here for a drug connection, and let's call a door driver at the same time. Now we got an alibi. But where is that DoorDash driver? Did he get thrown off the bridge? The real DoorDash driver, did he get thrown off the bridge here in the Canfield murders? Because it seems like he did. They're trying to come up with a different DoorDash person. When I see people not coming forward with identities, when I see false witnesses being produced, when I see that kind of falderall happening, I think, hey, I bet you the real driver got thrown off the I-5 bridge, Tyler, the I-90 bridge. Thanks, Christina. I've got so many questions now before the doc drops. I don't know which doc you're meaning, but all this was done in 2017. We did all the videos on this in 2017. If you're talking about with Tulsi Gabbard, they had a series of meetings. Susan Rice had a series of meetings with John Brennan and the CIA to say, hey, how do we stop Trump? It's December 9th, along with Peter Strzok, right? CIA covert overthrow, right? How do we stop them, right? Well, we got to pin it. We got to pin an investigation on him, and hopefully he'll try to defend one of the people we have infiltrated. We've already got surveillance for the last 6 months on 61 different people in the Trump campaign, right? We'll have somebody fall on their sword, like Mike Flynn. We'll say he was communicating with the Russians, right? And then we'll see if Trump defends him. That's exactly the same when they got Nixon. They got Nixon by saying, we have the Watergate break-in, so we'll commit the crime in the president's name. President says, that's not my crime. I didn't tell you to go rob the Watergate break-in, right? So we'll make it come back to the chiefs of staff, and we'll make it come back to the White House, and we'll get them involved in the cover-up. That will implicate the president. When the president finally has a meeting going, what the hell is going on at the Watergate? They'll implicate him, and that's a 17-minute gap. The same strategy was used to implicate Trump with Flynn. Same exact strategy. And Trump said, okay, you're the one who was talking to Kislyak about spent uranium, reprocessing spent uranium. Here's your text messages. While I was walking down the transom to take the oath of office, Mike Flynn, you were saying we're in like Flynn. You were saying, hey, everything's all set up for this uranium deal. Well, the uranium deal had already been done the previous year. The uranium deal, which was the Middle East Marshall Plan, had already been done the previous year. So all that was hoax. Mike Flynn created a hoax that he was doing a uranium deal while Trump was taking the oath of office. That was done a year before. The Middle East Marshall Plan was done a year before in 2015. So Mike Flynn wasn't doing the uranium deal as Trump was walking down the transom. He made it look like he was with Alex Gopson. He made it look like there was a uranium deal happening so that Trump could have the Mueller investigation thrown on him the very first minutes so they could keep the FISAs going on all the Trump people. But that Middle East Marshall Plan had been done a year before. I heard this morning that she was going to be a witness for the defense. When you have pronouns, we don't know. Pronouns are universal. So you've only limited down the number of people you could be referring to about 5 billion. How many? What? 8 billion or 4 billion. So go ahead and throw a name in there if you'd be so kind next time. She is half of the world. He is half of the world. You throw in the name, it really limits it down. Thank you very much, though, for your comment. You're talking about the DoorDash person. Again, false witnesses being introduced is your first key that something's up. The easiest explanation is Canfield massacre is a cleanup on aisle 6. They murder the wife, kidnap and murder the wife of a police lieutenant who was a part of SWAT. Right? That's the same person who, Harrison. They murder his wife, kidnap and murder his wife. To me, that's sending a message to the SWAT team. That happens the same thing as Canfield murders. They throw the DoorDash kid off the bridge because now he's no longer a witness. They get the deal signed with Koberger that day because there goes the DoorDash kid off the I-90 bridge. Right? There goes, you're not going to have anybody weighing in from the police because we just killed a police officer's wife. She's found dead on the mountain. Sarah Harrison's found dead on the mountain. So to me, those are intimidating, chilling factors that you would do if you're an elite and you're running the show and you want your guys to send a message. One of the best ways to do it is kidnap a police chief's wife. That means your kids are next. And the guy who did it killed his own kids. Okay? Just sending you a message. You're not immune. We just took your wife. We just shot her in the head on the mountain. Your wife and your kids are next, right? That's the fear that the Aryan Knights have instilled in law enforcement here. That's the fear that the Aryan Knights have instilled in law enforcement here. People are saying, is it Murphy or is it not Murphy? Well, what dog is she carrying down the middle of the street? What dog is Dylan carrying down the middle of the street at 3:30 a.m.? Doesn't that sort of coincide with somebody saying, get the hell out of here or else you're going to get killed? Get that dog out of here unless you're going to get killed. When we leave, then you can come back in. I don't care how cold it is. Isn't that kind of what the metadata says? Stated Molly, she's friends with Jill Thompson. Yeah, this isn't a real name. She's had 3 different names. That's another thing. When you introduce 3 different names, and Deidre, and you've introduced 3 different names and 3 different identities for this person, that's metadata to say the real one got thrown off the I-90 bridge. Tyler. I agree now, and I have even more questions. Murphy can't be there during the murders. The dog, little golden doodle, can't be there. Because if you're watching somebody get stabbed 50 times, I said this yesterday to the trolls. Why don't you have your friend stab you 50 times and bring a dog in it and then film the dog and see if the dog doesn't bark? The dog will bark. The dog will bark. From everything I've read, the whole case hinged on the white car, which there were several there that night. Well, again, this is what's going on here is pre-crime, predictive policing, they call it. This is Gotham. This is Palantir Gotham, which is we saw your car go there 12 times over a 6-month period. You must have done the murders. No, it means you're a meth addict and you went to that house for meth. Right? A stalker, right, would not just go in the middle of the night and look at a house. A stalker would go there when they're up. Right? A stalker would be following them all around, not just going there in the middle of the night to do a drug deal. Again, when I see state sponsorship to try to twist the information, I say, whoa, why do we have state sponsorship here? DoorDash driver ID'd, DUI arrested. Yeah, supposedly, but this Deidre has never been conclusively proven. We've had MM as her initials. We had several different stories about who this person is. And again, it's somebody who is associated with Aryan Knights, right? Wouldn't an Aryan Knight person come forward and be the witness, especially if they just got done throwing the real guy off the I-90 bridge? Hey, we just threw the guy off the I-90 bridge. We don't want anybody to know Tyler was the driver that night, right? Let's have one of our people come forward. One of the people who's one of our meth addicts come forward. Notice how she didn't come forward and testify and didn't use her real name, used 3 different identities, created as much confusion around the DoorDash driver being called. Is that not an obvious way? Take the murdered victim's phone and have them call DoorDash while you're dashing out the door? Wasn't there a DoorDash that occurred while the DoorDash person was called? Isn't that why the DoorDash person didn't deliver anything? Didn't they even talk about that at Jack in the Box 3 hours earlier, that they were going to do that when they were in Washington? Didn't the same conspirators talk at the Jack in the Box about doing that 3 hours later? The black truck, by the way, I'm not canceling free speech. I'm putting up your video. The black truck is the truck of Morrison's. Look at Dave Morrison's truck, right? Again, no one goes up there and we actually got a pickup truck that was about the same size of Dave Morrison's truck and the same color. When I'm there filming the Brony Boys doing their motorcycle stunts, if you haven't seen that video, and we almost got it. I should have asked him to actually park it where Dave Morrison's truck was parked, but you can then see the enfilade. If the sheriff is correct, and I believe he is, right, that there was a straight line going through the heart. The bullets went through the heart of Morrison first. They went through the heart of Harwood first and then went through the heart of Morrison second. The only way that could be true is if they were sitting in that truck. I can't remember what the Brony Boy truck is now, but it's in the film that I did out there, and it's on YouTube. But the only way it could be true is at a 90 degrees or maybe 88 degrees, maybe 92 degrees, but you can almost take a string. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go up there and do that. Take a string and show you exactly where the sniper shot had to come from. Had to come from. And I'm going to use tools that only Sherlock Holmes would have had access to with a string. I'm going to put a sawhorse on the line of fire because we know where the truck was. We put a sawhorse on the line of fire, and I'm going to take a string, and I'm going to show you exactly where the shooter was. And I can do that with string. I don't have echolocation. I don't have drones. I don't have the Skydio drones or anything like that. I can show you where the fire, where they couldn't get the fire going, and show you the trees that didn't burn and the trees that did burn. I have the evidence by going up there. Did the sheriff go up and show that evidence? No. The sheriff introduced a 22-minute black box. Dee Dee was supposed to wear glasses. Yeah, there's probably a whole bunch of folklore that's been generated around the DoorDash driver. I follow the dead bodies, right? You have 12 or 14. There's a small cottage industry, right, of all these people that say they were the DoorDash driver that night. It's a small cottage industry. There's thousands that say that they were there. Okay, that's not the place I'm going to find the DoorDash driver. I'm going to the I-90 bridge and finding out who did they throw off the I-90 bridge, because that person was a key witness. That person was a key witness to all the guys going out and dashing out the door. The DoorDash driver that they called in order to create their own alibi may be the person who was the only witness that saw all of them dashing out the door. It was smart to give yourself an alibi, use her phone to call DoorDash, right? Do a little Instagram, do a little DoorDash, make it look like she was still alive when you did that at 4 o'clock. That may have been clever, but the problem is you all didn't get out by the time the DoorDash driver arrived. You had to have the DoorDash driver come at 4 o'clock so that you could implicate Kopacka and Koberger coming at 4 o'clock. That all worked out, but you guys didn't get your asses out of there until 14:05. 4:05. You didn't get out till 4:05. There was still a couple of minutes. So the DoorDash driver saw you leaving, saw you 4 Aryan Knights leaving and a fifth woman, right? And maybe Kopacka maybe he saw Kopacka leaving with Koberger as well. That's why the DoorDash driver had to be thrown off. Again, why does the sheriff not say who the person is who was thrown off the I-5 bridge? Why didn't he say Tyler's last name? Tyler's family deserves to know why Tyler died. Tyler could have been targeted. And when I say that is, if Tyler, let's say Tyler was into some kind of, and we don't know who Tyler is, but let's say he was into some kind of online community. You could have used a Wes Rowley to target Tyler, to get to know Tyler, to start establishing Tyler's whereabouts, to start having Tyler going, let's go camping, Tyler. Let's go biking. Let's go up and be Brony Boys and do the motorcycling. That's why I filled the Brony Boys doing the cycling. Let's go do cycling, Tyler. Right? Now you're allowing the Aryan Knights from a hidden location to learn who Tyler is. Learn Tyler likes riding motorcycles. Let's just say the Brony Boys that I filmed up there was Wes Rowley trying to get to know Tyler. But you need somebody to go out and get to Tyler and become friends with Tyler. And then start introducing Tyler into various things like gender dysphoria and all these other things, so that you can create a case that he's going to jump off a bridge. If he's just a kid that's doing motorcycle videos and then he gets thrown off a bridge one day, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I now need to start introducing an alibi of how he was a Brony Boy and he was confused and he has transgender and dysphoria. And his family to this day probably believes that. His family to this day he believes he had gender dysphoria and he had this unnatural fixation with Brony Boy and all these other things and all this confusion. I'm saying this confusion was introduced because we don't want to throw the kid off the bridge without having some kind of audit trail that he was confused. And that was introduced by Wes Rowley, I believe. I thought Bushwhack was no, Bushwhack comes way before that. Bushwhack actually comes from the first use of Bushwhack, I think, is going to be in England. for like the highwaymen. But the person who made bushwhacking famous is the father of William Randolph Hearst, George Hearst. So all the Hearst fortune was created was from bushwhacking miners. Copper Kings Revisited, Idaho Style. Yeah, there's been various movies done about this, but you basically figure like this is the hunting mentality. Hey, these miners, these miners that have come over here to try to make it from their home countries, and they're slaving on mining claims 24 hours a day, right? And then they finally get a hit. Once you get a hit in mining, there's a vein. There's a vein that you can then mine, and that takes about 99% of the work out of mining. Now they're like prey. I go out and I shoot elk, and I go out and I shoot miners because they're expendable. I shoot Chinese and have Chinese blow up mountains for my railway because they're expendable. It's that expendability mindset. It's I'm elite and you're a prey mindset that we've got going on here, right? And anytime you see that, that's the dark hand. That's when we dig in. As soon as we see that, that's metadata for the dark hand. Trying hard to get the truth out. I see Randy, you retweeting a lot of the stuff I've done, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Florida is got to get back to Florida. I haven't been in Florida. I spent so much time in Florida, but lately I'm not. Why did it change 2 years later? Her original statement is spiky hair. Yeah, you could fill a Tussauds wax gallery with all the different descriptions of all the different people of the DoorDash driver at 4 o'clock at the Idaho 4 murders. That immediately to me said this is a cover-up. I'm just waiting at that point. When I see this litany of Flotsam and Jetsam, this motley crew that they've introduced, literally it's a cast of thousands. I thought that they were casting Cleopatra with the thousands of people they've introduced as the DoorDash driver. I said, I'm just waiting for somebody to get thrown off the I-90 bridge. I'm waiting for the real guy. Now that I've seen this cast of thousands, there was no way they would bring in this motley crew, right, and introduce 50,000 different alternative explanations of the DoorDash driver, unless there was a real kid about ready to get thrown off the bridge. Now, I would like to reach out to Tyler's family because I can prove that your kid had undue influence, and it's going to be Wes Rowley. There was a little group of about 4 or 5. This is what the girl says with the nanofoam. There's a group of about 4 or 5 kids that they were running together in a pack, like a brony pack. We have a witness. We have an eyewitness. Then this is 10 days before the shooting that the brony pack was running together. And that's when he gives his phone. He was told not to take his phone carry his phone anymore because not to be tracked. And that tells me that's the 17th is when the operation was thrown into effect. That's when Travis Decker is brought over. That's when he's going to go up in the campground. And that's when I'm going to start using Wes Rowley to get him food, right? Because get rid of your nanophone, right? Otherwise, there's no reason for Wes Rowley to give away $1,000 phone. There's no reason. We know he ends up there 12 days later at a shooting. We know he didn't do the shooting. So explain another way how he's up there with supposedly a shotgun and not doing the shooting. Somebody has to be doing the shooting. So the dots have to connect over the next 12 days. The dots have to connect with Wes Rowley down on Sherman Street and the shooter up in the mountains. They have to connect. They come together in the shooting. So we're not speculating that Wes Rowley is going back and forth to the shooting area. We have timestamped him 12 days before, and we think he was reaching out to Tyler. We think Tyler, I don't know, Tyler's about 23 years old. Wind the clock back. I've talked to a lot of U of I grads. I talked to a pre-med here in U of I grad. You wind the clock back 2 years, that's senior year or U of I. Who is Papa Roger? I question how they knew that the killer was in Pennsylvania. Oh, it's easy. Yeah, with with Bob Malone and ID Prism and swabbing everybody's nose, you can immediately see who everybody's related to, whether or not they have a fake name or not. This must be laughing about my cast of thousands. Literally, there are more people that have been introduced as DoorDash drivers than swum with John F. Kennedy on Bougainville with PT 109. The big joke was, if you had to get all the people, and John F. Kennedy used to say this, if I had to bring in all the people who say they swam with me when PT 109 got hit, I'd need to rent the Madison Square Garden. There's 20,000 different people that are saying that they were with me. They're tangentially there in Bougainville. My dad was on Bougainville when that happened. You didn't hear my dad saying I swum with John F. Kennedy. But the guy who did that operation, the salvage operation, was the fighting Marine that worked with Tom O'Loughlin. And that's how Tom O'Loughlin got to work for Kennedy. And I'm forgetting the fighting Marine, his name all of a sudden. Senator Jeremiah Lynch, associate with William Randolph Hearst, made a fortune in the Yukon gold rush, bought Egyptian mummies for the Bohemian Club. Yeah, it's not a hard model, right? And back in those days, people had to come all the way back to Seattle, if you remember, and then Vancouver, BC, was created from the Yukon gold rush as well, with all the Chinese that were involved in the original Yukon gold rush. But you sit there at the assayer's office, right? You get one guy at the assayer's office reading the Mark Twain stories all day, and then somebody comes in one day. Most people have a little bit of gold dust or whatever. Somebody comes in today with a rock. As soon as you see that rock, all bets are off. Now, I want to know everything about you. Tell me the story, how you found this. Now I send somebody out the back room. Go get the area knights. We're following this guy back to camp. Where does he drink? What saloon does he go to? We're going to introduce ladies of the evening to him. We're going to get to know him real well. We're going to get to know everything about him. We're going to get to know what his gold claim is. We're going to follow him. We're going to track him. We're going to trail him. He's smart enough not to give up, but he has to give up a legal description in his claim so we know where it is. How many guys is he working with? Just one guy? Throw him off a cliff. Just one guy? Throw him off a cliff. For 3 or 4 guys? Gunfight. Right? This is all told in the story Deadwood. Right? George Hearst. This is how he bushwhacked everybody. He just hired a bunch of Travis Deckers. Palantir, however you spell that, their stock went through the roof after the sentencing. Well, we said it was all about Palantir. And if you remember, I presented in Silicon Valley in December, and we said the adaptive post-training, the critical source code that Sam Altman is secreting, this critical source code. You think it's open AI, but it's not open AI. It's partially open AI, but there's part of the source code has been secreted, coveted, sequestered, right? If you don't believe me, believe Elon Musk, who wrote the check to start OpenAI with Sam Altman at the Rosewood Hotel in Menlo Park, where we went and I did this presentation. It was a couple of blocks away because we couldn't afford the Rosewood Hotel. But my point is that the adaptive source code was the secret sauce. That's also on the thumb drive when Suchir Balaji is killed. And guess what? There's 4 people that he did a 4-day hiking trip with before he died that were all a part of the Chinese team for AI that went on the various trips that he went to in China. They DeepSeek jumps to the front of the pack in AI because of the adaptive source code, because of this sequestered, secreted code, right? They jump to the beginning of the pack. We said so twice in 2 presentations in Silicon Valley in December. And we said also, anybody who gets this adaptive post-training will become a leader in AI. Now, if you remember the object model in Palantir, I know a lot about Palantir, right? Because I worked in Silicon Valley for 35 years. If you remember the object model, it failed. horribly, miserably. It was dogware, right? It was just bloatware that Palantir didn't do anything, right? You had to kind of have a separate piece of software give you the insight, and then you had to write your press clippings for Palantir, right? Because it didn't work. With OpenAI, it does. And as soon as we knew that they had the adaptive post training, we also said Palantir is going to go through the roof. And I don't take advantage of any of the stock tips I give, but that was one of the things we talked about. We actually had people from Palantir, we had people from DeepSeek, we had people from not Kleiner Perkins, but we had people from Horowitz, AZ24. We had them there at the presentation. You get that suture biology code. All of a sudden now your training data, instead of being one big blump of data that's the insights you're going to get from your code, you feed the machine. Your machine's learning, and then you feed it some more, and then it learns, and then you feed it some more, and then it learns. Feed it some more, and it learns. Adaptive post training is the name of the game, and it's sort of like you going from kindergarten all the way to getting your PhD. Hopefully you don't become a meth addict, and hopefully you don't drive other meth addicts the night of a area night murder. But it's that idea of you going year to year and graduating through and developing your knowledge on the previous base of knowledge, rather than you going, okay, we're going to sit you down at 16 years old and we're going to tell you everything that you need to know, kindergarten to PhD. That was the methodology, believe it or not, to train these AI databases before, not this graduated method that we've come to know of in the same way humans. But as soon as they figured out that you want to carry the learnings, carry the knowledge that you got from your first pass of training to your second pass, to your third pass, all the way through your matriculation, all the way through, that was the secret. And that turned a failed object model for Palantir into a very because they have all the data, they have all the data sets, they've got all the license plate readers, they've got all the Fusion Center data, they've got all the switchboard, what they call the switchboard, which is all your texts, all your phone calls, all that. They've got all your information. They just didn't have the juice to put the pieces together. And then they got the adaptive post training, and then whoa, we're sitting on a gold mine. And we said that in December of 2024, and it came to pass. Caused a minor stock market crash, if you remember, in January with NVIDIA stock and other AI stocks. So it was a blip because now people realize AI is worth even more. So then there was even more demand for the AI chips. And then they're building out. And Stargate with Trump and Larry Ellison, $100 billion project in Abilene, Texas, they're building out. That's a huge project. TSMC, which is the chip vendor that worked with NVIDIA, is building out in Arizona 4 plants. They're also building 4 or maybe 6 new plants in Taiwan. Papa R posted 2 chats. Papa Mau Mau, Papa Mau Mau. When I think of all the people that have been introduced as the 4 o'clock DoorDash driver, I just think of like a top 40 show of Casey Kasem. Oh, today we have a girl calling in from Schenectady, New York, and her boyfriend's out on a ship on the USS CVN 77 on the USS George Bush at sea. And she's calling in yet another on this week's Casey Kasem Top 40, yet another DoorDash driver that it could be. Did we have almost a rolling Casey Kasem Top 40 on who the DoorDash driver could be? Week in, week out, it was a different 40 possible people. In my opinion, Steve G. Yeah, there's going to be thousands of people that are pushed forward as the DoorDash driver. Follow the blood. I went to the Aryan Knights safe house, right, that they infiltrated with the kids. Right? Remember the sheriff says he had a problem with marijuana. He's not admitting that he's in the Good Sam program. It's going to turn out to be he's in the Good Sam program. It's right on the way to the I-90 bridge. I mean, within a mile. Yeah, this Bapa Hu Mau Mau thing. The Bapa Hu Mau Mau just reminds me of Casey Kasem. Here's another 40 people the DoorDash driver could be. It's not the guy we threw off the bridge. It's not the guy right by the Aryan Night Safe House that they infiltrated for youth, right? It's not where they do all their recruiting. Right? It couldn't be there. It couldn't be the I-90 bridge that they threw them off of the same day of the shooting. That was the whole objective, right? Is to kill people who to show law enforcement and also bring in Palantir Gotham. It wasn't for those reasons. It's these DoorDash drivers. It's these top 40 DoorDash drivers. It could be this week. There is only one man upstairs for me. Begins with J, ends with S. 5 letters. Can anyone change their pick and handle to? Yeah, there was so many. Hundreds of thousands of people who are the DoorDash driver. That to me said we're all, anybody that they introduce as the DoorDash driver is not it. Tell me who gets thrown off the I-90 bridge. Murphy's full name is Woof Woof. Murphy is a golden doodle. Murphy Woof Woof is his, I think is his last name. I do think the avatar resembles Brian, and they don't know who the suspect was in Pennsylvania. With Palantir, it's child's play. With Palantir, it's child's play. If you drive an Elantra to Pennsylvania, you're on so many flocks. You get so many flocks hits. Remember, Palantir is the umbrella. So I get all of the counties that have Palantir, right? I get all the state police, Palantir. I get all the way stations all across the United States. I get APLR hits, automatic license plate reader hits. And I don't know where. And plus, I have the telemetry on the Elantra. From the satellite telemetry on the Elantra, I know where the car is always if I have Palantir. And that's coming. It's going to be called Operation Stalker. Operation Stalker is there's a Kohlberger in your neighborhood. They did the same exact thing with January 6th. They said there's an insurrection in your neighborhood. You need to tell us who it is. You need to become an informant. So we need to hit you with a mass formation psychosis on how horrible Kohlberger is, even though the evidence doesn't support it in any way, shape, or form. We need to create this stalker mass formation psychosis because you need to fear the Kohlberger that you don't know. How many Kohlbergers are lurking in your neighborhood? How many Travis Deckers are lurking in your neighborhood? If he killed his own kids, don't you think he'll kill yours? If Kohlberger killed your daughter or son at college, don't you think they'll kill yours? Don't you need Palantir Gotham? Yeah, Murphy had a show that was called Murphy Brown. I think it was Candice Bergen that did that. Candice Bergen, didn't she date a guy, Candice Bergen? Didn't she date Doris Day's son who was doing the record contracts in Laurel Canyon? Again, who knew that they were promoting my Echoes of Laurel Canyon series? Didn't Candice Bergen date Diana Doris Day? Didn't Doris Day, Terry Melcher? Wasn't Candice Bergen? Didn't Candice Bergen date Terry Melcher? Yeah, the only reason Kohlberger's out there is Palantir Gotham. That has nothing to do with the facts. Kohlberger has nothing to do with the facts. If you want to go with the facts, 2 ways to go. Now, people say, oh, you shouldn't be talking about other people than Kohlberger. You can go ahead with the Palantir Gotham story. That's fine. If you want to go with the Palantir Gotham story, if you want to do Operation Stalker, fine. Has nothing to do with the facts. If you want the facts, start with the fangs. Start with the fingernails and the DNA under Maddie's fingernails, the 3 different males. Start with the bloody handprint. If you're going to do a real investigation, start with a forensic evidence. Oh, you blocked the troll. Okay. No, you know the guy who's hot, and I know this because the girls all say this. You mean I'm on a roll? You know, I'm a Cherokee on a mud fence. I don't have an opinion of myself, but the girls do like, if you want good looking, if you don't want just good information, but you want good looking as well. The new Air Force guy, the Undersecretary of the Air Force guy, is the next heartthrob, I think, and I think his confirmation's coming up in an hour. I don't know what his name is, but all the women are just swooning over this guy. So come here for the good information. You get the mud fence. You get the mud fence looks here, but then go there for Mr. Good Looks. And just, you know what? Put his video on and turn the sound down, and then put the good information on, and it's a perfect combination. Sad that the sister, I don't think the sister is assisting the false narrative deliberately, right? The sister is, you know, it's her Cecil B. DeMille moment. You know, are you ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille? And she's famous. She's world famous now. And Megyn Kelly, you know, made her world famous and everything. And I believe she said, she's right here in Coeur d'Alene. I believe and we know people who know the family, and we've been talking to the family members. She believed every word she said, right? Because it's so overwhelming to the family, and there's so many thousands of theories, right? I don't think she deliberately did what I don't think she's pushing. I don't think she works for Palantir. I don't think she works for Palantir Gotham. But the way they coached her along, was to believe that my sister didn't have a chance. My sister was sleeping, and that's not true. Her sister was fighting. Her sister had 20 stab wounds. Xana had 50 stab wounds. Right? And they tried to push the idea that everyone was sleeping. And the sister of Kaylee, in her speech, pushed that idea that she was sleeping. If she would have been awake, she said, she would have kicked your fucking ass if she was awake. Well, she was awake. She had 20 stab wounds. And Murphy would have been barking if she saw somebody getting stabbed 20 times. So it's not Kohlberger. This is on a different track. This is on a Operation Stalker. I saw the same thing with January 6th. Nancy Pelosi's kid, along with Gavin McGinnis and the Proud Boys, they created this. There's a stalker next door. Stalker living next door. They created a documentary called The Stalker Living Next Door. They planted the pipe bomb at DNC. That's what triggered continuity of government. They knew who did it. It was a guy who worked out as Senate Sergeant of Arms as an intern for, I think, our guy. But he had to have top secret clearance, right? That's why that Kamala Harris was told to go over park in the parking lot so that they could trigger continuity of government, right? We know it's a fake. We know this is a contrived situation to create a mass formation psychosis that there's an insurrectionist living next door. That's mainly going after white guys that are over 50 that own guns, right? This is a different thing. This is aimed at people that are students. This is aimed at people who are PhD students that could be trouble for us if they're not woke. If we start having students coming out of these various institutions that aren't woke, we have to be able to knock them down using some kind of metadata to knock them down to make them into stalkers. The whole idea of Brian Kohlberger isn't about the case. It's a symbol that's going to be manipulated to say, if we ever run into somebody that's not talking the WEF agenda, that's a PhD, we attack them on metadata. You went to get pot 12 times with your Elantra? Well, you're a stalker. You're a threat to society. Patash is Hebrew. You're correct. P-Tech, as doorway or opening. And this is the doorway and opening into all of the intelligence of the United States. And it was an exfiltration operation to Israel. Again, we did Birth of Israel. We did the Shoah Foundation, 1,000 Voices of the Holocaust. We did Iba Aman with the series. I do a show with the Super Jew. Only we're the only group, right, with those kind of credentials in terms of documenting the struggle of the Hebrew people, right, of the Jewish people. We're above everyone else except maybe the founders and the original settlers, and only we then, right, we're in the total incontestable position to be able to comment and call this for what it was, call P-TECH out for what it was, which was a massive exfiltration operation of U.S. intelligence information to Israel. People do want the truth, otherwise it wouldn't be here. 100%. Thank you. Did you follow the KR case? I'm not sure what the KR is. A lot of people do. The home address, we got burned out. I put my studio address, we got burned out. The troll wants to gloat now that Peter and I got burned out of our studio. Yeah, maybe you should get a life, right? 333 Swathmore is what I'm going to use. You burned us out. I didn't burn us out. I didn't light the fire. I don't have the Dragon drones. I wasn't running 3 different fire exercises when the Palisades fire happened. You guys did that. I didn't have Scale AI running a fire exercise. I didn't have Fire AID out of NASA out in Pasadena. I wasn't Open DeepSeek Labs was running a fire exercise too. I didn't run any of those things. You're the guys who burned me out, right? So that's on you. So don't expect me to bail you out. If you burn me out, I'm still going to use it. That's our studio address. And I'll be a little bit more. And if you don't use pronouns and you don't complete sentences, descriptive sentences, I probably can't put your comments up. If you have side conversations and so forth, you won't get your comment put up. Who wants that? The royalty check, the whiteout, Mickey Dolenz put in Peter Tork. Yeah, it's interesting because they thought the monkeys weren't going to get outed. When the monkeys originally came out, they thought, well, it's just like all the other bands. We have the Wrecking Crew play backup, and we have somebody else come in, and we just have a front man like Graham Nash to do vocals. All the other bands we've created are fake. What has everybody got against the monkeys? The monkeys is just another one. But then somebody did, outed them like Milli Vanilli, and all of a sudden they said, well, let's make a television show about it then. Let's make a television show about guys pretending to be a band. We'll call it the Monkeys. Hey, we're the Monkeys. Now everybody's come at me and said, oh, you're covering up Heinz Feldman. You're covering up Ebola. You're covering up Ebola in Saskatchewan. You're covering up Ebola in Manitoba. You're covering up how all the gain of function done by NATO in Canada that was shipped to Wuhan. You're covering up Heinz Feldman. You're covering up Marburg. You're covering up Crimea, Congo hemorrhagic fever. You're covering up all the monkeys, right? When you mentioned Peter Tork and you mentioned Mickey Dolenz, you're covering up on all the monkey labs. You're covering up on all the work with NATO. You're covering up on the COVID. You're covering up UPMC. You're covering up all these people. No, I'm not. I just said it. I went to Marburg. I went to all these places. I haven't been to the Rocky Mountain Tick Lab, Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever Lab in Missoula yet. I do need to get there, and I do need to get up to Manitoba to the Heinz Feldman Lab. That I owe Canada that. So, and I'll try to get that done. But I'm not covering that up. I just said it. We're not covering any of that up. As a matter of fact, we did a film, all the folks that are part of the live exercise and they're Armed Diplomatic Security Services people for the State Department who work for NATO. It was a NATO live exercise, right? they all want to say it's all about them. We didn't talk about them at all. Some of the people are here that were there when we were on the Potomac in March. We talked about Heinz Feldman. We talked about all of the contagions that were brought by NATO from Canada to Wuhan for 10 years. We used Scott Adams, and we'll do a simultaneous sip for Scott Adams. We used Scott Adams, and Peter Duke ran the show. We used WenHub, which is Scott Adams' program, to show all the flights back and forth between Manitoba, or I don't know where the lab is. I think it's in Manitoba, where the Heinz Feldman lab is. We showed all that. That's what we did. We didn't talk at all about NATO, CBS and CNN made it out to be. Our video that we did had nothing to do with that part of NATO. Our NATO video was Heinz Feldman flying all the coronavirus spikes and so forth, and the Ebola and all these other things that they were trying to aerosolize, that Heinz Feldman was trying to aerosolize to Wuhan for the last 10 years. Had nothing to do with the Armed Diplomatic Security Services person. Nothing. She was not in the video at all that we did after the first week. But 60 Minutes would make you believe that that's all it was about. CNN would say that's all it's about. Reuters would say that's all it's about. Forbes would say it's not in our documentary. And all that week, our documentary was all about NATO exfiltrating it from Canada to the Wuhan lab. Heinz Feldman aerosolizing all these pathogens that were hard to aerosolize, like anthrax and Ebola. 10-year program. I don't think law enforcement's corrupt here. I think they're just afraid. When somebody takes your wife, kidnaps them, and then shoots them on the mountain and leaves them for dead on the mountain. I mean, I've gone countless times to Kootenai County Sheriff. They're good people. They're just scared shitless. I went to Wallace. I went to the Shoshone County. They closed the whole office down when I was coming. They created a power outage. They took down the whole CGIS system, the FBI. They shut it down twice. She took medical leave during this, the sheriff out there. Everyone's shaking out there. When they were giving me the information about where the woman was killed, she was shaking. I have 4 witnesses to this fact. She was shaking. They knew if I knew where she died, I was going to trace it to the Aryan Knights. They knew I was going to go get cameras. They knew I was going to trace it to the Aryan Knights there, and she was shaking.